Hello everyone, in this video we will be talking about the three main germ layers. And in case you're not familiar, these germ layers are the ectoderm, mesoderm, and the endoderm. So you might be wondering, like, what do all of these mean? Like, what do they do? Let's first talk about how these three germ layers arise. So as you know, when we're trying to make a human being, you have sperm and you have egg. And once the sperm penetrates the egg, that's when fertilization occurs. And it forms a human. And, well, it's not really a human yet, but it's going to become a human. And that is what the zygote is. So we're forming something that has a potential of becoming a human. This zygote is going to go through a series of rapid mitotic divisions. That means it is just dividing itself. And that's going to form this berry-looking thing that's called a morula. And after the morula forms, we're going to get something called the blastula. And then finally, we are going to get something called the gastrula. This basic process that we just talked about, I will review it in further detail in a upcoming video. But for now, I just wanted you to know where these three germ layers are even arising from. So basically, when we first have fertilization, we have our zygote, becomes a morula, which becomes a blastula, which becomes a gastrula. This gastrula is what gives rise to the three germ layers. And these three germ layers, as we said, ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm, are very important because this is what's going to cause an actual human being to develop. So each of these three different germ layers will develop different parts of the human body that will slowly learn how to function. And once the child is born, the child will be a fully functioning human being without the help of the mother for the organ systems. So let's talk about which is which, and we'll also go over some easy ways to remember them. So let's start off with ectoderm. So when you see the word ecto, you should be thinking of outside. Like, it kind of sounds like exoskeleton, it kind of gives that vibe. So when you see ecto, you should be thinking on the outside. That's why we're able to distinguish this from, endoderm. Because endo reminds you of like an endoskeleton, and so this would be on the inside. But we will get to that later. It's just a way to differentiate them. So the way I like to remember it is ecto sounds like attracto, right? And I like to think of ectoderm as attractoderm. So one thing that makes us attractive is our skin, right? If we didn't have skin, we wouldn't be very pleasing to look at. We need skin to be functional human beings, right? So skin, another thing, nails, hair. These things are governed by keratin. Skin, nails, hair, also the brain, so the nervous system. You can try to think of it as, again, attractoderm, skin, hair, nails. You think of going to like the salon and getting your hair and nails done, and then or putting on makeup on your skin to be attractive. And then we're throwing in the brain in there. The brain is also very important for human function. You can think of as someone's brain and the way they think makes them attractive too. So that's just a mnemonic to kind of remember that. So when we see skin, this is the basic outer portion of our body. This is the first line of defense. First line of defense that our body has against the outside world. And that is lined by the epidermis, which I'm sure you have heard before. We will also review this more in another upcoming video, hopefully, regarding the skin and the different layers of the skin and the different functions of the different layers of the skin as well. So this is the main thing that you need to know for what the ectoderm does. Let's do mesoderm next, actually. So, and again, remember, we know endoderm is on the inside, so we can expect to think about endoderm after mesoderm, just so you can conceptually organize it in this order in your brain, right? So, mesoderm, I like to think of it as kind of like the middle, right? It's not really the endoderm, we're not completely getting to the internal systems yet, but it's the middle. And the way I like to think of the M also is means to move. So M stands for means, and this is how it was taught to me, that M stands for mean to move, and that also correlates with the M that stands for mesoderm. So how do we move? Like, as human beings, how do we move? One thing that you might be thinking of are our bones. So this gives rise to the skeletal system, right? So a lot of, bones, there's a lot of connective tissue involved in the mesoderm. So skeletal system allows us to move. You can also think of the circulatory system, right? Because our heart is moving blood, again, means to move. It's kind of circulating blood around our, around our body, so that every single part of our body, we can function when you have the oxygen delivered through the circulatory system and through the blood. So circulatory system means to move blood, skeletal system means to move our bodies. And I will just write over here again, blood, so those are our erythrocytes. When we're talking about the mesoderm, we are thinking about endothelial lining. So endothelial lining that will line our blood vessels, things of that sort. So basically, if we have, say this is the lumen, and this is the blood. So lumen is the inside of a hollow tube, so this is the inside of whatever organ we're looking at, and the blood is kind of on the outside. So endothelial sounds like the inside, right? Endothelial. So since it's the inside, we have that lining over here, and it is facing the inside, which is facing the lumen of these organs. So finally, let's go over endoderm. Now be careful. The name endothelial and endoderm, they sound very similar, but just because this is the endoderm, and endo sounds like internal, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's endothelial lining over there. So the endoderm, like I just said, we want to think of it like internal derm. Endoderm, internal derm, indernal derm. It's just a funny way to remember it, just by manipulating how we pronounce things. So internal, we're going to talk about like our really internal systems. That would be the digestive system, which that's going to include our stomach, our small intestine, our large intestine, right? Our cecum, colon, rectum, all of that. That's part of our digestive system. And then we also have the respiratory system. So this is our lungs, allows us to breathe, right? So it's called the endoderm or internal derm because you're basically giving the linings to these very internal systems, such as the digestive system and the respiratory system. So this is going to give us epithelial lining. And remember, you would have expected it to be endothelial because they sound the same, they have the same prefix endo. But we actually have the epithelial lining over here. which means it's going to be the lining over here, right? So say this is the lumen of a random organ in our digestive system. That means we are going to have the epithelial lining over here, epithelial lining over here facing towards the blood. And that's basically going to be protecting our internal organs and giving lining to our internal organs. So that's where we get endoderm from. Now, there are two parts of the body, two openings in the body, and that is the mouth and the anus that we have not discussed yet. So where do you think that would go? I think we can rule out mesoderm because they're not really helping us move, but would they belong in the ectoderm or the endoderm? Are they lined epithelially or are they not? So the mouth and the anus, or actually, I like to remember it as they're not very internal, right? The anus and the mouth are exposed to the external environment. They're not completely caged inside of the body. So that's why I like to rule out endoderm for the mouth and anus. So we're going to write except for the mouth and anus. So we're giving our epithelial lining to internal systems, right? Except for the mouth and anus. So the mouth and anus will be included in the ectoderm. Mouth and anus will be included there. So these are the different germ layers, the ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm. And this is what allows our little zygote over here to then finally develop these 3 germ layers to become an actual human being. So I hope that was helpful, and I hope to see you in the next video.